The night was quiet over Europe. The air held the faint hum of memory, distant, like the echo of a song sung long ago. It was 1945, but the world still trembled from what had come before. Beneath the stars, soldiers and civilians alike looked toward the dark horizon and wondered when peace would truly feel real again. It had begun years earlier, when the world cracked open in 1939. Germany's invasion of Poland had set the stage, a moment so sudden that entire nations seemed to hold their breath. The invasion began on the 1st of September, tanks rolling across borders, the Luftwaffe roaring in the sky. Within weeks, the world was at war again, a war that would pull in over 60 countries and consume tens of millions of lives. In those early years, cities glowed red from the fires of air raids. London's nights were no longer silent. They were filled with the low drone of German bombers and the eerie wail of sirens. Yet, even amid destruction, life carried on. Children were sent to the countryside. Mothers patched uniforms, and radio voices spoke calmly over the static, assuring people that the dawn would come again. Across the Channel, the French countryside changed under occupation. The cobblestone streets of Paris were lined with soldiers in gray uniforms, and yet, in hidden corners, quiet acts of resistance bloomed like spring flowers between cracks in the pavement. People passed secret messages in loaves of bread. Bicycles carried coded notes, and in dim rooms, whispers of hope moved from one heart to another. By 1941, the war had stretched across continents. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, brought America into the conflict. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. And indeed, it did. The Pacific soon became another vast battlefield, one of jungles, islands, and restless seas. In the Pacific, the nights were warm, but filled with tension. Soldiers lay awake listening to the sounds of waves and distant engines. The Battle of Midway in 1942 shifted the balance. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were lost, and with them, the tide began to turn. Yet for those who lived through it, the facts of victory were quiet things: a breath of relief, a letter home, a moment's silence for those who would never return. Far from the front lines, in factories across the world, men and women worked under dim lights, building the machines that would fight for them. The American home front roared with production, planes, ships, tanks rolling out daily. Women filled the roles left behind by soldiers, their hands strong and steady, their spirits unyielding. They became the symbol of resilience. Rosie the Riveter, smiling under her red bandana, a reminder that wars were not only fought on the battlefield, but in every home touched by absence. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, the shadow deepened. The world learned, piece by piece, about the horrors hidden behind barbed wire and concrete walls. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, names that whispered of suffering too vast to be contained in words. Millions of Jewish men, women, and children were taken from their homes, their voices silenced. It is said that at night in those camps, prisoners whispered stories of their old lives to one another, holding on to memories like fragile stars, small lights that refused to go out. By 1943, hope began to stir again. The Allies landed in Italy, and slowly, cities once darkened by occupation began to see the return of daylight. In Russia, the Battle of Stalingrad had turned the tide of the Eastern Front. The bitter winter, the endless siege, it broke the might of the German advance. Soldiers wrote home about the frozen rivers and the smoke that never seemed to clear. When the Red Army finally pushed back, the world exhaled, though the cost was beyond counting. Then came 1944, the year of return. On June 6th, the beaches of Normandy bore witness to one of the most daring operations in history, D-Day. In the early morning fog, thousands of soldiers crossed the English Channel, the sea alive with ships. The beaches were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Many never made it past the waves, but their sacrifice opened the way to liberation. As the sun rose that day, the first hints of freedom spread across Western Europe. For those in occupied villages, the sound of distant gunfire meant hope. Families peeked through shutters, clutching old photographs and prayers. In Paris, when liberation came that August, the bells of Notre Dame rang for hours, echoing through streets filled with tears and laughter. The war was not over yet, but for the first time in years, people dared to dream of peace again.